We're getting in a time machine, that's true. And right before we go back to March 7th, 2020, there's a little something I want to add to the ride for this portion. And I'm going to need some help from the audience. When you hear something where you're like, oh, that's old, you're going to press a button. You too, you guys can do this. You guys can be a team, that's fine. So if I mention something about, let's say, Pete Buttigieg's presidential campaign, can you show us what's going to happen? All right, time travel, you guys.
I can come down, twirl me round and round in the clouds, and we lift and we glide like butterflies.
All right, thank you guys all for being here. It is an absolute thrill. You guys seem like a really smart group, so I'm hoping you guys might be able to help me. What does it mean that I'm the friend that all my friends call when they need someone to drive them home from getting their IUD inserted? Really, like, I put no effort into this, and somehow I've become the go-to. I'm the IUDD. Something about my face just says, I can responsibly get you home from a surgical procedure. Haven't figured out how to monetize that, so if we have any business-minded folks who have ideas, you can find me after the show. Thank you so much. Something else I've been hearing a lot lately, people say, oh, you look like my childhood babysitter. And that's the sound of all of you going, oh my God, she does look like Amy Gunderson. But the more I've thought about it, I think it's just that I generally dress like an extra from my so-called life. So you're right, I look like an approachable girl you knew in the 90s. 100% correct. Thank you so much for asking. I would love to talk about the Catholic Church. How did you know? Thank you so much. There is so much to say about the Catholic Church, and thank God we're finally saying it, right? But there are some things we're not saying, and this may be a controversial opinion. I believe in giving credit where credit is due. The Catholic Church invented something, they invented it, they perfected it, it now appears all over the world. I'm of course talking about gaslighting. For those of you who aren't familiar with the exercise, the way that church works is every week, millions of people show up to church, and church is like, here we have for you the body and blood of a human man for you to consume. You might be, well, like, literally that's crackers and some juice. And they're like, no, bells, 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 cannibalism, go! It's been thousands of years, how are we not talking about it? It's time. I get some interesting responses when I tell that joke. I had someone come up to me after a show once, and they said, well, yes, that's perfect. You're the most Catholic-looking person I've ever seen. And what is the appropriate response to someone saying, you look like 2,000 years of sexual repression? I'm asking because I truly don't know. Well, now I'm feeling confessional. I want to tell you guys something. I feel safe. I am a woman who is aging. I just keep getting older every year. I just keep doing it. And I live here in LA where they will fine you for that. But something I've noticed about myself as I get older, a way that I've evolved specifically in how I engage with men in dating. I am trying things that I never would have dared in my younger years. My new thing is, my new kink, setting boundaries. It's amazing, it'll get you there. Just not letting a man treat you like his therapist when he won't even call you his girlfriend. Oh, it's wild. And like any healthy comic, I wrote that joke to make my therapist proud of me. Shout out to you, Jacinda. When it comes to dating, I think we all have something I like to call deal makers and deal breakers. You know, things you're considering when you're considering someone as an option. And I think it tells you a lot about someone, what their deal breakers are, or their deal makers. Like, I have a friend who, if they go home with someone and that person doesn't own a book, they won't sleep with them. It's a deal breaker for them. I know a woman who, if you tell her she has Connie Britton hair, deal maker. Is that woman me? It's not important. Or I know a guy who, he had a very particular tattoo. It was right here. And it was the Lacoste alligator. And I hooked up with him twice. So the fact that that wasn't a deal breaker for me is my way of telling you that I grew up in a town with 7 more country clubs than grocery stores. Yes, 7 country clubs, no grocery stores. Might explain why so many girls in my high school weren't eating, but I never really thought about it as an access issue. That's interesting. Yeah, I went home recently. I got to spend time with my family, and I want to be fair. I don't think my family thinks that my point of view is completely without value. I do think they wish I wouldn't open my damn mouth so much. And it's weird to realize that your family feels about you the way the world feels about Lena Dunham. Yeah. Thank you. In terms of my family, if I had to choose a favorite character, I have to go with my mom. My mom is incredible. She's kind of this amazing combination where on the outside she looks like your archetypal warm and fuzzy suburban mom, and on the inside she's dark as fuck. To paint you a picture, my mother is the kind of woman who can make a tray of fresh lemon bars appear out of thin air. She's always flanked by 1, maybe 2 golden retrievers, and she really does want to know, how's your dad liking retirement? But she also says stuff like this. We were riding the train from our house in the suburbs into New York City. It's a very gray, wintry day. And we're going through this sort of burnt out industrial section of the Bronx, and she looks out the window and says to no one, "Oh, that would be a good place to dump a body." She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't not terrifying. I love that about her. So as I said, I am from New York. I live here now. And I am a full-fledged cliche of a woman who moved to Los Angeles. I've got crystals in my house. I know a lot more about astrology than my parents would be proud to hear. And I have a friend who's a psychic. She gave me a reading, and in the middle of our reading, she became very alarmed. Something very urgent came through. She's like, "I don't always get these, but I'm getting a past life from you. Do you want to hear about it? Are you comfortable?" I said, "Thank you for asking. I'm into boundaries. Yes, I would like to hear." Thank you. She said, "Molly, in a past life, you were a very powerful nun. And you had to be the secret keeper for the church and for all the dark deeds. And this is the root of your distrust of men." This was interesting because I did not even know I had a distrust of men. But I have to say, there's something to be said about moving through the world knowing, like, I was a power nun. You know? When I have a dry spell in my love life, I know whose vow of chastity to blame it on. So yeah, I don't know that I'm Catholic anymore, but my chart says I'm a power nun rising. Oh, people who know me well know that my life coach is the 11-year-old girl I babysit. She's incredible, she really is. She asks the best questions. My job is mostly just driving her and her brother home from school every day. But she'll get in the car. The first time I met her, she knew that I was a writer and a performer. She gets in the front seat and she just goes, "What are some shows you think you might want to write on? Think about it, get back to me." She's also my agent, as it turns out. Sometimes she'll just get in the car and be like, "Molly, what did you write today? Why?" But the day I really knew what kind of mind I was dealing with, she gets in the car. She's 11, going on 45 in the front seat. In the back seat, her brother is 9, and he's a hard 9. We're driving down Melrose, we see all these billboards. And he sees a billboard for Kung Fu Panda 3. And so he says, "Yes, thank you." And he says, "Ooh, Kung Fu Panda." And she goes, "Ugh, really?" He goes, "What? It's funny." She goes, "That movie is about genocide." To which I said, "Excuse me?" She's like, "Isn't the story of that movie that there's a whole bunch of pandas and then a guy says, 'I'm gonna get all the pandas'?" They say when you meet someone who's gonna change your life, you know. In that moment, I knew. I really knew. I'm so grateful for her and her brother and for young people in general. Like, young people are really incredible. They're on a whole other level right now in this world we're living in. They're one of the few things that are keeping me from drowning myself in my bathtub. No, guys, I'm just kidding. Baths are disgusting. If I had to give this younger generation a note, though, just a note, is that I find them a touch unrelatable, if I'm being honest. Maybe because I spent most of my teen years trying to figure out how to illegally download the Goo Goo Dolls on Kazaa. But for them, like, a normal day could be like participating in a nationwide nonviolent protest, or like landing a sick burn on Twitter to the NRA, or rhetorically impaling a senator at a CNN town hall. It's simultaneously exhilarating and demoralizing to watch yourself become outdated in real time. I feel about these kids sort of the way that I feel about service dogs. Wait for it. Give me a minute. No, I mean, everything about service dogs is heartwarming and amazing, except for the moment that you realize that a dog is contributing more to society than you are. It's just a crazy time to be alive. It's crazy with, I don't know, the decline of our nation as a democracy, and the gutting and dismantling of all of our norms and institutions. Is that outdated? Interesting. Okay. We can talk later. No, but there are times when it feels impossible to imagine that I could believe in anything ever again. And when I'm really grappling with that sense of impossibility, I like to think about that moment in the 1999 teen rom-com She's All That, where the school DJ, played by Usher, nonchalantly launches the entire school, into a choreographed dance moment at their prom. And when I think about that, really anything feels possible. So I'm gonna say what we're all thinking. Usher 2020! Okay, I can feel some of you guys are holding back. You think that's unlikely, okay? I understand your concerns. We've all been following Usher's recent legal troubles. For the few of you who have not been following Usher's recent legal troubles, he has been sued by several of his former sexual partners for giving them sexually transmitted diseases. This is true. And I didn't come here tonight as an Usher apologist, not particularly. But I do believe in giving credit where credit is due. And I think this guy has always been pretty straightforward with us about who he was. This is a man who put out hits about his confessions, about letting it burn. And so he cheats on his wife and gives a bunch of people herpes, and then we're surprised. I mean, in the words of Maya Angelou, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. If you're mad about that, that's on you. You gotta unpack that for yourself. I wanna go back for a second. So I mentioned My So-Called Life earlier. How familiar are we with this show? It's a 1994 teen drama starring Claire Danes, thank you. I feel like I grew up watching Claire Danes, like a very formative person in my development. What else do we know Claire Danes from?
Romeo and Juliet.
Thank you, she was Juliet in Romeo and Juliet. Homeland, Carrie Mathison in Homeland. Beth in Little Women. Right, a lot of iconic characters. And all of her characters kind of have this shared quality of a very intense, raw, messy unraveling. There is no one in our culture we celebrate more for regularly becoming unhinged than Claire Danes. Do you guys like watching a woman cry? Have you ever enjoyed watching Claire Danes cry? Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I think if we all moved through the world with the raw expressed intensity of a Claire Danes character, we probably wouldn't have jobs. Or, get invited to many parties, but it would be very freeing, to just get to unload and then walk back out into the world, because it's just another day when you're Claire Danes. In My So-Called Life, in the first episode of the series, there is a very pivotal scene where Angela Chase, played by Claire Danes, decides to dye her hair red. But it's not red exactly. It's a color called crimson glow. And to me, this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect, because that quality that all Claire Danes characters have, that's crimson glow. She is always just smoldering with molten red-hot emotion. If all of us are mountains, Claire Danes gets to be a volcano. Seems incredible. That's all I'm saying. People are so weird. We're all so weird, right? But I think the thing that's most comforting is that we're all kind of weird in the same ways. Like, we all do a lot of the same weird things, we're just not always honest about it. I was out for drinks with someone new the other night, and I found myself thinking like, oh, this is going great. I'm having a really great time. I want this to keep happening. And then you open your mouth to tell them that, and you inexplicably choose to talk about 9/11 for 20 minutes. You know, it's like a very human thing that we all do, where you would rather talk about the worst tragedy on American soil in modern history than risk your own vulnerability. I love how we all do that, right? Every one of us. I'm going through a hard time. You know, there are some things that happen in life that intellectually you understand are going to happen, but you're never really prepared for them happening. Like, how can you be prepared for finding out your gynecologist is retiring? It's been tough. I'm working through it. Ever since our world became sort of, I don't know, poorly written Handmaid's Tale fan fiction, I've found that nothing makes me feel more safe or accomplished somehow than when I go to the gynecologist and this old white man examines my body and then says, yeah, you're fine, we're gonna leave you alone, we're gonna do nothing to you. Yeah, I don't get to feel that anymore. It's really hard. So thank you for bearing with me, you guys. It's a tough time. There are some bright spots in our world right now. We're at... I know, right? But we're at peak TV, you know? That's a thing that people say. So I'm watching a lot of Frasier. I don't know what it is. There's something about coming home and snuggling up to the sound of a couple of pretentious old white men that just is the best way to fall asleep. It's so good. But a friend of mine asked me the other day my opinion on another show, and I heard myself say, it had the heartbreaking inconsistency of a half-baked creme brulee. And I was like, I'm watching too much Frasier. That's how you know. I did get some good advice recently. Does anybody want some good advice? Okay, so I was having a really bad day, and on my way home, I called a friend of mine who lives around the corner from me because she gives really good advice. And she said, you know what, let's take a walk around the neighborhood and we can unpack the day you had. So we do just that. We're walking, we're talking, and we walk right into a coyote. Like as close as you are to me, like clocks us dead in the eyes. And I panic, I grab my friend and I start running, which, pro tip, that's the wrong answer, they'll follow you. But yeah, so we hit on someone's doorstep until he lost our scent and scampered away. And then thankfully we were able to get back to the business of the evening, which was unpacking the day I'd had. So we finish our conversation and we're walking home, we part ways, and I get a text from her with this advice. And it said, be big and loud, take up space, speak authoritatively. We are lucky to be alive. And I thought, thank you. Like, I really needed to hear that today. Then she texted me again, and she said, I Googled what you're supposed to do if you see a coyote. You're supposed to be big and loud, take up space, speak authoritatively. We are lucky to be alive. So Tony Robbins, watch out. The only thing any of you guys need to do to live an empowered life, live your life like there's a coyote in front of you. That's the ticket. I have this theory that the city that you live in, you're in a relationship with. And so the cities you no longer live in, those are your exes. And lately I've been thinking about one of my exes. My college ex, Chicago. Some of you might know him too. We were together through college, stayed there for a couple years. He's a great guy, just wanted different things. But been thinking about him a lot lately. My current boyfriend is LA, right? The guy I always swore I would never date, because his hair is always better than mine. And sometimes he wears a fedora and I have to look the other way. But he's the only person who doesn't make me feel crazy. So that's LA. And then there's New York. New York was the guy I thought I'd end up with, that I grew up with. And on paper, New York, objectively fantastic, has so much going for him. But in the end, New York ended up being the guy whose dick was just too big for me. You know, I mean, I could have made it work, but life shouldn't be so hard. Try telling your parents that's why you're not moving home. But yeah, so Chicago. I lived there in my early 20s, so it was a very messy time. And I keep thinking about this party that I threw for myself when I just moved into the city. I was hopelessly in love with a friend of mine, and it was a one-way situation. You guys remember your early 20s, right? And so I had told him as much, and he responded, like you do, by leaving the state for several weeks. He was like, okay, cool, I gotta go. But while he was gone, I decided I needed a reason to see him once he was back, because I knew he was coming back. So I decided I needed to throw myself a party. So I threw myself a birthday party in May. My birthday is in November. It's not important. I threw myself a 23rd and a half birthday party because it felt necessary. But yeah, I really believed in my gut that this was a really good friend of mine, and he wouldn't miss my birthday. What kind of friend misses your half birthday? So I rented out the back room in my favorite bar, I invite all my friends, I get done up, and by all accounts, a recipe for a wonderful evening. And we're all there, my friends are showing up, but I'm watching the door. I just really need us to be cool. I think we're gonna be cool. I'm looking cool, but I need someone to walk through the door. And I do what you do in such a situation. I drink so much whiskey. I had 4, 5, 6 whiskey gingers. And I was feeling fine. I was okay. Well, until there was a moment where I realized how I was actually doing. You know how you don't know how drunk you are until you walk into a bathroom? And then all of a sudden, all your choices are catching up with you. So I stumbled into the bathroom, and I go into the stall, and I pull the door shut behind me, and the hook clocks me in the face. And I am immediately bleeding and crying. The kind of pain that's so sudden that you don't begin crying, you just are crying. And in that moment, my first instinct, my repressed Catholic instinct was, stop crying. Stop the bleeding, stop the crying. But then I realized that really all I wanted to do was cry. And it wasn't because I had gotten in a fight with a bathroom door. It was because of the other door that I've been watching all night. So, for a moment there, in a bathroom stall, I let myself sob. And then I heard, and I looked down, and in the next stall there are feet. So there has been someone who is witnessing this meltdown, and they are telling me without words a very strong message. And I said, I'm so sorry. And I stepped out of the stall, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I cleaned the blood and the snot and the feeling off my face. And I look at myself, and I just zip it all back up. And then I walk back out to the party, and no one knew. Well, no one except the person in the stall. But I guess the reason why I keep thinking about this story is because that is who Chicago was for me. Chicago was the person who taught me that even when you think that your world is falling apart, there's always gonna be people around you who are just trying to handle their shit. And even more than that, Chicago gave me a gift because for a few moments there, in a bathroom stall and in a bathroom mirror, in that story, I was Claire Danes. Thank you guys so much. This has been an absolute dream. We'll see you in 2021. Oh my God, you guys, welcome to 2021. As you can see, that's where we've arrived. This is no shoes, no structure, no nothing. Welcome aboard. Thank you guys so much for playing Time Machine. Oh boy. I was just about to ask you guys, how are you doing? But I don't think we should ask each other that anymore. We don't know how we're doing. None of us do. Even if you think you do, I promise you, you don't know. I'll be moving through my day thinking I'm doing all right, and then my roommate's cat will meow at me and I'll be like, you don't even pay rent! So yeah, we don't know. It's okay, we're in it together. Oh, I did finally figure something out. I've never been a cat person and I finally know why. Cats are the fuckboys of pets. Right? I mean, cats, they never want to be in love with you, right? They're like at best sort of ambivalent about you. They might come at you in the middle of the night and be like, you up? But if you're looking for something reliable, like a cat is not what you're looking for. When someone in my life tells me, I'm thinking about getting a cat, I'm like, who hurt you? Want more for yourself. You all deserve more than a fuckboy who shits in a box. Just tell yourself that every day. From that, you may have gathered I have begun dating again. And I've realized when you're dating, it's kind of always award season. Right? Well, it's exciting to have a night out, you get dressed up, you go out, you don't know what's gonna happen, maybe something good. And then when you have sex with someone for the first time, that's like the moment at the Oscars when they open the envelope. And then you just have to tell yourself, it's an honor just to be nominated for an orgasm. She gets it, yeah. My generation gets a lot of flack for being raised on participation trophies. But I really think if there's any situation where participation trophies are totally reasonable, it should be with sex. I really think we all should be winners. Sex should be like youth soccer. Sportsmanship is required. It's good exercise. And at the end, someone should give you orange slices and Gatorade. That should just be how we do it. This is an absolute delight, but it's weird being in a room together, right? You guys are doing amazing. Like, I'd forgotten what laughter felt like, so thank you so much. I spent a lot of time the last 2 years now thinking about laughter because I had watched, I guess it was a YouTube video or I'd read an article or something, I now can't find it, but there was something that I encountered right before the pandemic that stuck with me the whole time. And it was this thing about the origin of laughter. Like, why do our bodies make that sound or do that thing, right? And it was like an anthropological reason for why we started doing that. And this theory says that it comes from before we had language, when we needed a way to communicate to the people in our tribe. When we perceived something that we thought was dangerous, we'd let them know, like, oh, it's actually not a threat, we're fine. So you'd see something, you'd hear something, you'd tighten up. And then you'd be like, oh, it's just a twig snapping. It's not a saber-toothed tiger. And you'd relax and the laugh would come out. So laughter is just our way of saying, like, oh, we're okay. It's okay. So thank you tonight for coming and letting me know, like, for right now, we're all right. I don't know about, there are some saber-toothed tigers outside. I'm not gonna say they don't exist, but right now we're okay. So thank you guys. Did anybody miss holidays with their parents or their family over the pandemic? And by that I mean just didn't get to see them, not miss them. I've reached the age where I've started to see the ways in which I'm exactly like my family and the ways in which I'm nothing like my family. Like, it's become so obvious. A couple months ago, I got to spend time with my family. I had dinner with my dad, and it was very eye-opening. We were having this friendly debate about the apple pie we were about to have for dessert. And my dad and I are similar in that we both can generate a fair amount of enthusiasm for debating the perfect way to serve apple pie. It's like whipped cream, ice cream, hot, cold, whatever. So we're having this conversation, and I, of course, think of a scene from my favorite movie, When Harry Met Sally. Anybody familiar? So there is a scene, you may or may not know, there is a scene in a diner where Meg Ryan has a very particular apple pie order. And I think it's relevant, so I take my phone out and I play it for him. And it was interesting, because I guess he sort of just clocked this as like, oh, we're doing show and tell. Because he took his phone out and then proceeded to play me a speech from 1983 that Ronald Reagan gave. And there was no mention of dessert. I was confused. And I'll be honest, in my confusion, I wasn't nice. What followed you might call a fight. But I'm trying to be a little bit more compassionate because my dad feels about Ronald Reagan the way I feel about When Harry Met Sally. You know, it's just this thing from the 80s that you got into when you were young, so you're always gonna feel attached to it. And if someone responded to me the way I responded to him, you know, Molly, I don't like When Harry Met Sally. Because When Harry Met Sally let thousands of Americans die in a pandemic in the early 80s. That would have been really upsetting for me to hear, so maybe that was hard for him. Some people really like Ronald Reagan. I'm trying to understand. I mean, like, that's not a joke. That's just a thing that is true, and I'm confused. No, I've been trying to learn more about that part of history, but the more that I learn about the guy, he just seems like a Cold War era Kardashian. Right? He was this Californian who rose to fame on his early film work, but really made his mark by taking capitalism and really running with it, you know? I mean, he and Kim are not so different. They're both sort of geniuses at bamboozling the American public. They each took a system in our society and manipulated it, and then told us, no, it's totally normal and natural. That's exactly how it should be. What Ronnie did with the economy is sort of like what Kim has done with the female body. Though to be fair, Ronnie did prefer with the economy a more top-heavy silhouette. I'm just saying, waist trainers and tummy tea are just trickle-down economics all over again. So watch out. Okay, I want to go back for a second. When I mentioned When Harry Met Sally, I mentioned a diner scene. Was anybody thinking of a different diner scene? Yes. Right, okay. The fact that you thought I showed my father a scene where Meg Ryan pretends to get off to a pastrami sandwich. You thought I showed that to my father. That's how I know you weren't raised Catholic. Yeah, no. Oh, Catholicism. It's wild. I mean, you just don't talk about sex. It's just this weird sort of ritual where we pretend we don't know what it is to show respect to each other. And that's all fine, but then there's this other part of the business model that complicates things, where another big part of being Catholic is making more Catholics. So how many of you Catholics have more than one sibling? Right, okay. So it's like a little hard to understand where your parents are coming from as people who don't know what sex is when you're sitting at the dinner table and you're looking around at the receipts. It's kind of like someone who's an online shopping addict being like, oh no, I didn't buy anything, I would never. And you're like, well, the Amazon boxes on the doorstep tell a different story. I don't think religion is all bad. I think there's something kind of beautiful about being able to be connected to all the people that came before you, all the people whose DNA you carry in your body, you're never gonna meet. But by experiencing things or learning about things that they did, you can feel close to them. And I think that's kind of beautiful. So when I wake up in the morning and I feel an intense amount of shame and know that I shouldn't experience pleasure, to know that all my ancestors also felt that way is really magical. Kind of gorgeous. I've had some time on my hands the last however many months, and I fell down a rabbit hole on Ancestry.com, because I'm gonna be that aunt. But I found out they've traced back 10 generations. There's a very interesting woman who I am apparently descended from, named Mary Rua, or as the legends say, Red Mary. She may or may not have been one of Ireland's first serial killers. And there's a lot of different stories. I mean, you could read it as, you know, a woman who, in an effort to avenge her husband's murder, she had to marry and murder a bunch of enemy soldiers, just to keep the family castle. Or she was a monster who hung servants from the windows. There's a lot of conflicting reports. But either way, a pretty interesting person, the fact that I can be talking about her 400 years later. And I guess living through a historic moment now, it had me thinking, like, what are our descendants gonna know about us in this moment? I don't think I'm a Red Mary level ancestor. All they'll know about me is that I was bad at making sourdough. I inherited this trait, a quality that gets me in trouble sometimes. I'm not a mother. I'm often mistaken for a mother, an expectant mother, specifically. I just have a very fertile quality. I mean, I'm descended from very fertile folk. Like, this was built to be in a bog, digging potatoes and birthing a child every 10 months. So they're not wrong. I'm not mad about it. I feel good about it. I know some of you are like, oh, how embarrassing. No, mothers are amazing. They're the peak magicians. They've made something appear, not out of thin air, but out of thick hips. Like, that's impressive. So yeah, no, I don't feel bad about the comparison, but what's uncomfortable is what I've learned about myself in these interactions, because there is no better feeling for me than when someone asks that very stupid question, oh, you're gonna have a baby? And I know that with one word, I'm going to make them wish they were never born. No. Oh, it feels so good. There's something diabolical about me that I enjoy that much. And you're like, yeah, she's descended from a serial killer. That all tracks. Oh, man. Yeah, no, that's been happening to me for years. Sometimes from people I know, sometimes strangers on the street. One time, a guy was in the middle of hitting on me, and he commented, oh, you're pregnant. And it made him more interested. He proceeded to double down on hitting on me. He said he wanted to take both of us out, like for a steak dinner and a movie. I was overwhelmed by the chivalry. It was amazing. But yeah, no, I mean, some people here might be like, really? Like, people just comment on your body when you leave your house? And yes, gentlemen, that happens. The women here know that when you go out in public, there are just gonna be people who have ideas about what they think your body would be good for. And they gotta let you know. And I think that was something surprising to me about the indoor times, was that I think I missed all of that chatter. It was so quiet. It was too quiet. I got addicted to having the news on because it was so quiet. I became a person who mainlines NPR. Just had to have it on all the time. So much so that I actually became fixated on noticing the ways in which the dynamics of Washington were in my house. Because I lived with 4 roommates. I lived with 2 couples, and then me. 2 couples did not get along very well. They didn't have a lot to say to each other. And so I was like, oh my God, we're the US Senate. We got the Republicans, we got the Democrats, and then there's me. I'm the independent senators. And I know you walked in here and you're like, I'm getting an Angus King from Maine energy from you. Now you can put your finger on it, that's what it is. But yeah, it's very strange to be an independent senator in your own house. It's a particular flavor of powerlessness that I don't recommend. But I guess, like, in those times, we were all feeling a little toothless in 2020. I think that was kind of a universal experience. Oh, speaking of, I need to tell you guys, I just went to the dentist for the first time in a while. And it was unlike anything I've ever experienced. Have you ever been to a dentist who is your age? It is wild. I was like, we have made wildly different choices. Oh, she was a hoot. Let me paint you a picture. So she had very, very long, shiny hair, and she was clearly the meanest girl in her high school. And she proceeded to give me so much information about my teeth in the absolutely most unkind way. Like Regina George with a drill. She looked at my mouth and she was like, oh, you've ground your teeth down to nothing. Oh, did no one tell you? Oh, what you're doing is you're brushing your teeth too hard. You're trying too hard. I was paying this woman to bully me. That's what being an adult is. But I think I have an issue with dentists in general, because I can't get on board with the premise that a human mouth could be clean. Like, it could be less dirty. This thing's not gonna be clean. We all know our dogs' mouths are cleaner than ours. Like, that's the study everyone cites, that it has to be true, right? There is no greater proof that God is a comedian than we were built feeling compelled to put our dirtiest parts and our ugliest parts together. I mean, I'm not trying to body shame anybody, but genitals look like a rough draft. Human bodies are a work of art. Like, you got Michelangelo's David or the Venus de Milo, but I can't help but imagine the person who was assigned designing human beings, and I think they ran out of time. They were like, shoulders, torso, like, my deadline! We're all walking around with a first pass in our pants. It's a great equalizer. Gotta go back to this terrible dentist. So she put so much fear in me that I was gonna lose my teeth. Just gone. And I don't know why, but it disturbed me to a degree I wasn't prepared for. Because this feels like a time when we need our teeth. And it's not just that teeth are useful. Like, I do like eating and they come in handy, but I don't ever want to be someone who my descendants could call toothless. She didn't have teeth. And also, like, on a practical level, women, you know, from true crime, like, when we are dead and bones, like, these are the last thing left of us on this earth. That's how they find you. It'd be very cruel to lose those. And don't worry about me. I have a new dentist now and a night guard, so it'll be fine. Fingers crossed. Something I've been hearing a lot that confuses me. When people find out this is a thing I feel compelled to do, all of this, I always get the same response, and it's people being like, oh my gosh, that's so brave. So brave, I would be so afraid I could never do that. Which is very kind. Like, I'm happy to get a compliment, but I think it's strange because it says something about what we're willing to call bravery in our world. Because there are a lot of things that people do every day that are objectively terrifying, and no one's calling them brave. I mean, I know people who have had children. Talk about bravery. I don't know, I think we're just not honoring the right things. I want to celebrate these people because what I'm doing here, this is all very fun and I appreciate you all being here, but if this were to go badly, if I just forgot to say more words, I mean, the stakes are relatively low. Like, the stakes are zero. I mean, I would be sorry, but if you're raising a child and that goes badly, I mean, insert all of our worst nightmares, right? Like, we could have another war criminal in the world. We could have someone launching another social media platform. Destroys democracy. Or somebody who, when you ask them their favorite part of New York City, they're like, Times Square! It could go badly, that's all I'm saying. Really could. And I just think a little fear is a good thing. You know, I think it's useful. If you're having a kid and you're not a little bit afraid, I think maybe reconsider what you're doing. No, fear is useful. Fear does things for us. Like I was saying before about these anthropologists, like fear and laughter are friends, right? Laughter is what we do to process fear. And I think, not that they're wrong, but I think what the last few years have taught me is it's not that we're laughing because we're safe. We're laughing because we have to shake it off to be ready for whatever's next. And this is the portion of the evening where I share with you guys that for a long time I wasn't able to write jokes. I was waiting to feel safe, I guess. I was waiting for the moment where the twig snapped and there were no saber-toothed tigers and we could get back to business. And that didn't come. And so I was writing other things. And what I learned is even if you tell your brain to write a joke or write a poem or write anything else, your brain is going to stick on whatever you're thinking about. So this is not funny. This is not a joke. But I feel compelled to share something that I wrote when I couldn't write jokes. Are you guys okay with that? Are you ready for something a little different? I promise you this is not funny. No, really. Okay. Did you know that every time you crack your knuckles, you're actually talking with your bones? Your ancestors, they gave you your bones, and every snap, crackle, pop is their way of saying, hi, hello, wake up, get up, do it. Do all the things we never got to. It's weird to have a body, to know you're this mosaic of a whole bunch of people you'll never get to meet. They've all been broken down to dust and put back together in you. Just a collection of broken glass pieced together, refracting and reflecting infinite stories you've never heard. Sometimes I get stuck in the mud of my own brain, and it feels like maple syrup stuck to the plate after pancakes. But it's not always bad to stick, because sticky means sweet. If life weren't sticky, it probably wouldn't taste very good. And one thing about me is that I'm always hungry. I sometimes look at my hands and see my Nana. The sharp smell of the lotion she used to rub on our fingers. Nana had a tough childhood, a depression so great we all capitalize it, childhood. By the time of me, she was a woman who knew to take care of something so it would last. Her house, her clothes, her hands. A school nurse, she gave me lotions and creams, taught me what my cuticles were, that sometimes to care for something, things need softening. Wear down the hard edges and prune your life like an unruly garden. Her hands near the end, no polish, unsoftened. They stick in my brain. They didn't look like her. I wanted to rummage in the medicine cabinet, or I don't know, one of her many purses, to find that cuticle cream with the horse hoofs on the label and that sharp scent. But her hands, the wrinkles around her knuckles, the line of her thumbs, her naked fingers were new to me, and somehow a spark of recognition. They were mine. I saw the future in her fingers. I didn't look away. I stopped wanting to look through her purse. I watched my old fingers and my now fingers hold each other. Again, who's to say exactly what that was? But I would like to submit it as an artifact for the record. When your grandchildren ask you what 2020 was like, you can tell them that's what a comedy writer was writing. Thank you all so much.